Greetings, my fellow Americans. I'm Bill Lipinski, and my good friend Ray Hanania is up next.
And I am Ray Hanania, and it's always a pleasure to be with former Congressman Bill Lipinski. It's a wealth of knowledge about politics. And between us, we hope that we give you some insight into the issues, whether you agree with us or not. This is season 3, episode 1, January 4, 2024. And we're going to be talking, Bill, about the upcoming presidential election, the Kennedy challenge, and some polling, correct? That shows Robert F. Kennedy in a pretty strong position this early in the presidential campaign.
Yes, I am absolutely amazed, Ray, that he is doing as well as he's doing. In a very recent poll, nationwide, of over 1,500 people, Joe Biden had 30, Trump had 29, and Kennedy had 15. Yeah, I got confused for a minute on 2 different polls that we're dealing with. The one poll is nationwide, 1,500 people, and it's Trump 38, Biden 37, Kennedy 15. Now, with 18 to 29-year-olds, it's Biden 30, Trump 29, and Kennedy 34.
Just the initial data that you said that Biden is leading Trump by 1 point, to me is shocking, because I didn't think Biden was doing that well. You know, that I think he's having serious problems, but that's interesting that suggests that the two of them are running neck and neck. And yes, Kennedy can be a wild card, right?
No question about it. And remember, it's not the popular vote. What it is electoral votes. Consequently, if Kennedy gets enough electoral votes, that would throw it into the House of Representatives to make the final decision. And I don't see the Democrats voting for Trump, and I don't see the Republicans voting for Biden. So they may very well look towards Kennedy as a compromise candidate.
So let's explain this to the listeners. Yeah. So the successful presidential candidate has to have 270 electoral votes.
That is correct.
In a 2-candidate race, that's pretty guaranteed that one of them is going to do better than the other. I think Biden had something like 301, and he was like, I can't remember, 70 electoral votes ahead of Trump. But Kennedy doesn't have to get the majority vote in this country to stop that 200 from either candidate to get that 270 votes. That's the threat, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So, and then what happens? So let's say we get 3 candidates and nobody gets 270 votes. It's like a Chicago election between Richard Daley, Jane Byrne, and Harold Washington. Yeah, although it's not that decisive.
Well, it goes to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, each state, I don't know exactly how it goes, but I know it goes into the House of Representatives. This happened once before in the Tilden election, and the Republicans made a deal with the Democrats that they would pull the federal troops out of the South. So the South, once again, would be more sovereign after the Civil War. And of course, that unfortunately stopped a lot of reconstruction that was going on in the South. But it goes into the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would make a decision. And as I mentioned earlier, and see if you agree with me, I can't see Republicans voting for Biden. Can you?
No, not at all. And as you pointed out earlier when we were talking too, that it's very hard to see Democrats voting for Trump. So maybe they might vote for a third party just to get him out of it. But do you think it's a majority vote of the members of the House that would decide that?
Ultimately, it has to be, one of these candidates has to get 270 electoral votes, okay? So the electors from each state would have to decide, say if it was a state that Trump won, and we wind up with the situation where we do not have anyone with 270. The Kennedy people would have to convince the Trump people from various states to throw their delegates to Kennedy. Now, I'll tell you, Kennedy, I saw him on TV a couple of times in the last few days. This situation with the vaccinations, I wish he'd stop talking about it, because the more he talks about it, the more confusing his position gets, to be perfectly frank with you. Now, I think he's a very intelligent fellow, and he can certainly discuss his position on these vaccinations. But the way he does it, it takes him 15 minutes or so, to get to the point. People aren't going to listen to that, particularly in a presidential campaign. They're going to spit it out right away. Let's go. And he does. I've seen him, Now, I have no position. I have no problem with his position. I happen to believe much more in the vaccinations that people got. But there are people in my own family who are not strong supporters of that. So there's a genuine difference of opinion. But I think it's really the news media that's trying to sabotage Kennedy by continuing asking about these questions. Now, I tell you, he was asked about the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And he of course, is with the Israelis. But he says, it was cheaper to rebuild Europe with the Marshall Plan than the money that has been put into Palestine and the Palestinians there. The money has been taken, for weapons, for sabotage. And really the people, if the money had gone to them, they would be much, much better off. They wouldn't be inclined to support Hamas. And they probably right now would be a two-state solution.
Yeah, and just two things. One is just going back to the Electoral College and how he addresses the anti-vax vaccination issue. I think you're right. I think one of Kennedy's problems is he needs to do a better job of communicating. He needs to do a better job of messaging. You can't just, go on and on about these topics, without realizing that people lose, focus on you when it gets to be too long. So he needs to kind of really be smarter about presenting his messages. But I don't know, maybe that he'll pick up on it, but I also believe that you're correct when you say that the news media, I think, is really heavily pro-Biden. They hate Trump. It's not so much that they love Biden. I think they just hate Trump so much that they think Biden is the better alternative. And they're going to do everything possible to make anybody as an alternative to Biden look bad. And I agree with you. I think this anti-vaccination thing is a good example where the media has said, oh, this is just a crazy person saying crazy stuff. And I don't know if you see, like on social media and online, where if you say that these vaccines are dangerous or ineffective, social media will censor you and say that you violated what we believe is factual. And I'm thinking, wow, suddenly they've taken the word factual to represent your opinion. So you can't have an opinion that they don't like anymore.
No,
and I think that's a problem.
Very true. Now, when he went in and explained the money that has gone to the Palestinians, I mean, he could tell you, if they got it all, how much each Palestinian would have received. And he can also tell you how much every person in Europe, if they were getting it directly, would have received with the Marshall Plan, and how much each country in Europe got. I mean, the knowledge that this guy has is incredible. But truthfully, if I wasn't really interested in him, he would have lost me 3 or 4 minutes into his explanation of the Palestine and the Marshall Plan comparisons.
Yeah. Yes.
If I have a hard time hanging on, you can imagine what the general public has.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's his big stumbling block. And you being in politics for how many years? 22, I think, as a congressman, and how many as an alderman?
8 as an alderman, 22 as a congressman.
Yeah, 30 years in politics, and me in journalism, I think, covering City Hall 17 years and 45 years in writing and journalism and everything, covering politics. It's interesting that if you can't boil things down to 3 clear bullet points that are easily understood and easily come across as reasoned and be believable, you cannot win. You lose voters, and I do think that that's his big soft spot that could hold him back. But on the Middle East stuff, I think that that's another example of, I think he's just pandering to a vote, because there's no way that the whole burden of this conflict falls on the backs of Palestinians, who are the occupied people. They're not in control of their own lives. They're not in control of their elections. They don't control anything. So money that's given to them is given to them for very specific purposes. And a lot of the case, that money is just to keep them at a status quo as refugees, not to, bring them into society there. Israel has a great influence over it. So for me, I don't like that issue with him,
Okay.
and I think this is a choice that everybody has. None of these candidates are perfect.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have to write off stuff on each of the candidates and decide what's most important. And I've already decided the reason I like Kennedy is because of that JFK issue. And I really want it resolved. I'm never going to get satisfaction from a presidential election. But if I get all those documents released, and finally, after 60 years, nearly all my life, being able to see what really happened, I would feel very satisfied with that.
Well, that's good. That's good. I mean, I'm not ruling out voting for Kennedy. We'll just have to see how he goes along. But he does. I remember when I was running against Marty Russo, and we were on a TV program in a debate back and forth. And at that time, the Japanese cars were really inundating the American market. And I said, listen, if I was president of the United States, I would bar all Japanese cars from this country for 5 years. Very simple, very direct. It was the headline in the Tribune, in the Sun Times next day. Okay, I had to put together a whole program because I thought of that. Once it went over so big, I had to come up with ideas as the foundation for it. And I put together a bill. I introduced a bill. And I still say to this day, that helped Ronald Reagan say, if you're going to sell cars here, you're going to build them here. And that's how we wound up having all these Japanese car dealers, manufacturing cars in our country.
Yeah, and you hadn't planned on saying that, had you?
No,
You hadn't gone.
Not at all.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, for candidates running for office, being able to sense what is it that people care about, because the fact that these are foreign cars made in foreign countries, the obvious conclusion is let's just ban those foreign cars from coming into this country so that we could focus on American-made cars. Now, there are other alternatives, as you noted. They ended up bringing these foreign manufacturers into the United States, employing Americans, because the truth is, sadly, in my opinion, the Japanese foreign-owned companies make a better car than the American companies today. And I'm not exactly sure what the cause of that is, but I have not bought an American, quote unquote, an American founded car, I'd say in 30 years. Everything has been a Nissan. Nissans have been reliable. So how do you address that? Is it because I'm un-American? No, it's because I know a Chevy isn't going to be as reliable. It's going to cost me twice as much to maintain it. And I still have to, work and put food on the table. So do I, compromise to make sure that I have the, the lifestyle that I need to live? How important is that car issue? But you have to be able to explain that. And I think you're right. I think Kennedy's biggest challenge is he's not clear on what he says. He's saying stuff out there, and he's inundating the media with stuff, but the messages are not clear. I think and I don't mean to go on so long, I apologize, but I think what he needs to do is have one big press conference and identify his 5 top issues and be very clear about what those 5 top issues are, and let the public kind of judge him based on that.
I think that'd be a good strategy on his part. There's no question about that. You have to be able to think on your feet if you're going to be successful as a politician.
Yes.
When I was I received a call from President Reagan thanking me for voting for military aid to the Contras. We had a very nice conversation. And at the end, he says to me, is there anything I can do for you, Congressman? Now, I had not thought of an answer for that question because I never thought he'd ask me that question. But somehow it came right into my mind. Mr. President, have you ever heard of the Southwest Rapid Transit System? And of course, he said, no, I haven't, but I'll have someone call you and discuss it with you. And 6 weeks later, we had the money for what today is the Orange Line.
Yeah, and that Orange Line has, thank you, Bill, for doing that, because the Orange Line has been very beneficial to especially the southwest suburbs, which are always the last in line to come, to receive benefits on transportation. So that alone was a major advantage for, I think, that region of the city.
I agree.
What's the latest on the debate? I mean, I think if we have any presidential debates moving forward, I think Kennedy should be included in all of the debates.
Well, I think that he should be included also, but it seems to me a lot of those debates are run by
each party.
Yeah, each party in the primary. Now, I don't know exactly. I think in the general election, which is what you're really referring to, I think it's run by the various networks. I mean, Fox does one, ABC, NBC, CBS. There may be some other cable stations that do it also. I don't really know.
So maybe after we have our carjacking conventions in Chicago, because I'm very worried about these conventions in Chicago, the Democratic convention, and I think the Republican one is up in Wisconsin, right? That's going to be in Milwaukee. I'm concerned about what could happen at a convention.
I definitely am also.
Yeah, especially with the issue of crime and carjackings. They can't. Are they going to create a place for the migrants to be able to be treated with better care than the homeless people that we have already in this country? They're going to be given a front seat, and they're going to be part of this debate. I think that these conventions are going to raise issues that are going to turn many voters off to both parties. I think it's going to be very interesting. But Kennedy is at a disadvantage. He doesn't have a convention. So after the two Democratic and after the Republican and Democratic conventions are over, then it's the two party candidates and any third party candidates, and no labels, nothing yet though, right?
Nothing yet. Nope, nothing yet.
Is there a likely?
If you get no labels in there, now you have 4 candidates that are going to be pretty well funded, pretty well known. Right. So it really cuts down the chances of someone getting 270 electoral votes.
Right. Some people are going to say that hurts Kennedy by having a second, third party candidate. So if the no labels party puts up a candidate, it'll have their candidate and the Kennedy candidate, and people will jump to the wrong conclusion and say, there's no way Kennedy can win. But I think the point that they're missing is the one that you just brought up. This isn't necessarily about taking the total election and winning. It's about preventing a Democrat and a Republican from getting 270 electoral votes. Absolutely. And that's a major loss and embarrassment that might, trigger the public to say, oh, maybe we should look at somebody else. Yeah, that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?
It certainly would be. By the same token, you'll still have the parties, one or the other, in charge of the House and the Senate. So there is going to be an absolute need for compromise, which will be very beneficial for our land at a liberty and fortress of freedom called the United States of America.
And I think Kennedy and a third party would be at a somewhat disadvantage because when the Republicans and the Democrats get into a situation where they can't control the delegates, I think they're more than likely, insiders are going to want to pick a Democrat or a Republican, not an outsider. Although personally, and we're out of it, correct? At this point, the public, we would be out of it completely.
You'd have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, this will be decided by the insiders. And I don't know if Kennedy has much of an insider base, in the political system.
Yeah, but we discussed earlier, Ray, that the Democrats won't vote for Trump and the Republicans won't vote for Biden. So they're going to have to, I believe, come up with a compromise candidate.
And if Kennedy's smart and gets his messaging done right, he could step and say, listen, We need a new direction instead of this accident between Republicans and Democrats, unable to lead this country. We need an alternative. He has to be ready for that. I hope he can get his message together.
Well, I hope he does too, because I think it'll make it a more interesting presidential race.
All right. Well, Bill, we hit our 20-minute mark for this one. We want to thank everybody for listening. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And we appreciate you joining us here at Two Guys on Politics. We'll be back next week when we talk about other issues, and we hope you'll tune in. Thank you so much.